Hey there. Let's talk about career fulfillment. Now, I know if you grew up in the 70s and 80s, like I did, career fulfillment wasn't the goal, right? So let's reflect on what we were never taught about career fulfillment. Let's reflect on how society and the school systems and well meaning adults have conditioned us to pursue titles and stability and this linear idea of success without really teaching us how to find work that's fulfilling and aligned with who we really are. Now, I did have a good example in my mother because she changed careers quite a few times. And so I did see her seeking more fulfillment. I saw her really pursuing a calling. And she went back to school when I was quite young to do her master's. And her career took some interesting twists and turns. And she really pursued what I would call her calling. And so I saw that model and tried to find that for myself. Now, it took me 25 years, but here we are. So I think typically the career advice that we're given and what we grew up with is like, do something that's a good choice, right? Like, work hard, follow the path. You can be anything, you can do anything, was the message I received, right? You can do and be and have anything you want in this world, but choose wisely, right? Get a good paying job. Do something lucrative, right? Certain professions are more lucrative than others, and so you want to choose wisely, right? Pick well. And so it was like, follow the right path, right? And figure it out, but get a good paying job. And this approach doesn't really take into account what you're passionate about, right? It doesn't take into account your values or your interests or even really your purpose, right? Like, why were you put on this earth? And so I think the new career advice should take into account fulfillment, right? Like, find your passion and do what you love. That's going to have a better outcome for mental and emotional well-being than getting into a career that might look good on paper, but it doesn't really suit you or it doesn't really fit you. I think the other two pieces to this new advice could also include the fact that your career path is not linear, right? This progression isn't necessarily linear. So let's normalize the twists and turns, right? And the third thing is that the missteps are not failures, right? They're learning opportunities. I don't regret any of the career missteps that I made. I don't regret any of the twists and turns because I learned something. I built a beautiful network of humans that I wouldn't have ordinarily come across or interacted or connected with. And so I'm really, truly grateful for all of those experiences. And it led me here ultimately. So let's go back a minute because success has really been narrowly defined for many years. And I think we were led to believe that success could be measurable through education, professional experiences, and monetary compensation, right? That was sort of the metrics for success. Like, you could be deemed successful, or this is what we were led to believe, if you got the education, you had a good professional experience, and the monetary compensation, right? The money that went along with it. And the definition of success that we've learned from educators and parents and family and society led us to believe, or led me to believe, that I had to become something in particular, right? A lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. There were certain acceptable professions that would lead to this idea of success. And so there was a lot of pressure, right? I'm sure you felt it too. There was pressure with this narrow definition of success, right? It's fairly limiting and a bit oppressive, to be honest. And also quite selfish, I think, and short-sighted or short-lived even, because what's happening is we're coming to this mid-career point and realizing it's not a good fit for us. Whatever we got into, we did the right thing. We checked the boxes. We took that career path. We adhered to this linear definition of success. So why doesn't it feel better, right? Why doesn't it feel congruent with us? Why doesn't it feel more meaningful? And I think it's because this piece is missing. This fulfillment piece is missing. And maybe you didn't even ask yourself what you wanted, right? What did you want in this whole thing, right? So this success model, it's been narrowly defined, and I believe it's led to this burnout and dissatisfaction and unfulfilled situation, stuckness that we're in right now. And so this new definition of success is more sustainable, right? Because it asks the question, what's my purpose, right? What am I passionate about? What's going to give me fulfillment and joy? And so this new approach, or this new definition, includes fulfillment, which has longevity, right? That has sustainability, right? If you are doing meaningful work that aligns with who you are and your uniqueness, then you're going to be able to contribute to the world as your best self. And then your happiness tank is full, right? Your happiness tank remains full in that scenario. You don't get depleted and unfulfilled and exhausted every day. You don't dread going into work on a Monday, because you actually are joyful and passionate and energized and juiced by the work that you're doing, right? That's a much better model. That's much more sustainable than this old linear, narrow definition, right, of success. The next thing I want to talk about really is why fulfillment is often the missing ingredient in career planning. I don't think it's considered, or hasn't been considered, for decades, right? We tend to prioritize salary, job security, and prestige, right? Those are sort of the metrics. And the missing ingredient, in my opinion, in career planning up until now, has been this piece of fulfillment. And we've prioritized salary and security and prestige over personal values and over our interests and over long-term satisfaction, because the salary, the prestige, the title doesn't necessarily equate to job satisfaction, right? It doesn't equal job satisfaction, right? It leads to careers that, while successful on paper, can feel really empty or unrewarding or even draining. So prioritizing that external mechanism, right, title, prestige, salary, can ultimately lead to an unrewarding, unfulfilling career. And here's what I've noticed, right, in coaching many professionals who have gotten to this mid-career point and feeling pretty unfulfilled, is that fulfillment really has been overlooked. it's not an ingredient that's been considered in the approach, right? And so fulfillment is overlooked for a few reasons. For me, it was because of obligation and responsibility, frankly, right? There's this sort of pressure to have financial security, and so fulfillment fell down on the list in terms of prioritization. There's also this societal pressure, right, and expectations. Like if you've worked your butt off and gotten the designation and gotten the education and gotten the certifications, then, you know, why wouldn't you just do that thing, right? Do the thing that you got educated and certified to do. Why do you need to worry about fulfillment, right? And so the emphasis has been on achieving milestones and high pay and titles. And so there is that societal pressure to keep up with that, right? And the emphasis on achieving those milestones typically overshadows the importance of personal satisfaction. And that's the norm, right? That's our cultural norm is, you know, achieve and hit those milestones, hit those marks, and that overshadows personal satisfaction. The other reason why I think fulfillment is typically overlooked is that we lack self-reflection, right? For the most part as society, we don't do this inner self-reflection before we approach our career, right? We sort of blindly assume that the societal norm is accurate, right? This cultural norm, these professions are legitimate, these professions are acceptable, these professions, you know, are what you can pursue, right? And this lack of self-reflection then leads us into careers that might not fit for us personally, right? We need doctors, we need lawyers, we need engineers, absolutely. But we also need car wash people or, you know, street cleaners, or like we need everything in our society. Those weren't great examples, but you get my point, right? So many don't take time or aren't encouraged to actually search their soul and ask themselves what they really want, right? You're not encouraged to even ask that question. And so if you aren't encouraged to ask yourself what motivates you or what interests you, then you're obviously not going to be truly aligned with who you are, right? And so if you lack this self-reflection, if you don't ask yourself what energizes you or motivates you, then you explore career paths that are not aligned with your uniqueness, right? So you could end up in a career that doesn't fit, that doesn't bring you joy or fulfillment. And the last reason that I think fulfillment's really been overlooked is because we've been focused on external validation, right? So we want the praise, we want the promotions, we want the external validation that comes with salary and that promotion and praise. And so there's this heavy reliance on external validation, which can create this sense of emptiness, right? Because if you don't have intrinsic satisfaction, then you're constantly going to be seeking more. It's never going to be enough. Now, I'm not saying don't seek. I'm not saying don't grow and evolve. But if you're doing it from this lack of intrinsic satisfaction, then it's going to feel really empty, right? You're never going to be satisfied. You're always going to be wanting more and more and more. And so what happens when you add fulfillment into the metrics or into the mix of the approach to your career, all of a sudden you feel a sense of calm. You feel a sense of peace, right? Because you've got that internal or that intrinsic satisfaction because you're aligned with yourself, you're congruent with who you are, you're doing work that aligns with your skills and your unique talents and your unique offering to the world. And that has longevity, that has sustainability, right? Because you're not seeking the external validation, you have the intrinsic satisfaction within yourself. So I'm going to give you two quick examples of clients of mine that really followed the right path, right? Followed this narrow or this linear definition of success and still feel empty, or felt until we coached together. So the first client I'm thinking of is Katrina. Now, she became a lawyer. Her dad was a lawyer. It made sense, you know, from probably a little girl. She just had it in her head that she would become a lawyer. So she did the right things, right? She, top of her class in law school, got in with a great firm, busted her ass, got, you know, accolades, all the things. When she came to me, she was probably 3 years into her career as a, you know, real lawyer after doing the bar and all of that. And she just couldn't figure out why she was miserable, right? She's like, I hate this. I hate it every day. I can't get out of bed in the morning. She was having panic attacks. She just, it was not what she wanted to do. And she couldn't see herself doing it for the next 20, 30 years. And so really what we had to unpack is why she went into that profession in the first place. And for her, it came down to, well, I didn't really think of anything else, right? It was almost like just that's what I was supposed to do because dad was a lawyer. And so I just went along and did it. Good profession, good pay, prestige, all the things, security, stability. She's like, but I actually hate it and super miserable. So when we unpacked why she went into that profession and actually got to the root of what she wanted to do, the things she was meant to do, it's completely changed course for her, right? She's now an entrepreneur actually, and she's running a small business of her own and she's loving life. The other client I'm thinking of is Ryan. He became an emergency room doctor. So his mother was actually in the pharmaceutical world. And so growing up, he had healthcare influence, right, from his mom's profession, and recognized based on his mother's commentary at the kitchen table and so on, that being a doctor rather than the pharmaceutical sales rep, being the doctor was really the step up, right? So if he wanted to make it in this world, becoming a doctor was really the thing. And so he pursued that and worked his butt off and did his residency, became an ER doc. And he came to me last year completely burnt out, completely miserable. He'd already taken a leave of absence and was miserable with no desire to go back. And so for him, we had to, again, unpack why he went into that profession and what it is that truly lights him up. Now, there was aspects of the job in the beginning that kept him juiced and excited, right? Emergency room, there's going to be a new thing every day. There's challenges every day, kept him interested. But he really ultimately hated doing the work. It wasn't for him. And so unpacking what it is that he was meant to do, his desires, his passions, his interests, and then finding that intersection of what could be supported as a career based on his skills as well. So if you're feeling at all like that, I would really encourage you to reach out for help, right? Don't stay stuck. Don't try and go it alone. I'm going to leave you with 3 reflective questions. And I think these questions are going to help you sort of start to unpack and maybe get a little bit unstuck from where you are. So grab a journal book or a scrap piece of paper even, and I'm going to give you these 3 reflective questions. And I'd encourage you to just write what comes to you, right? Ask yourself the questions and then see what bubbles up to the surface. So the first one is, when was the last time that you felt energized by your work? So the work that you're doing right now, when was the last time that you felt really energized by that work? The second question is, if money, titles, prestige, if none of that mattered, what would you do instead? So if it didn't matter, if titles, money, prestige, if none of that mattered, take that right off the table, what would you be doing instead? See what comes up. You might be surprised. The third question that I'll leave you with is, what version of success would you define for yourself? Like, if no one else was watching, if no one else cared, right? If no one was watching you, what definition of success would you define for yourself? Not what society defines for you, not what your parents decide for you, none of that. If no one else was watching, what's the definition of success that you would define for yourself? So take those 3 questions and I would journal, see what comes up. You never know, you might be surprised. And if you need help navigating a career change, reach out. I'm happy to chat. There's a link somewhere in the bio there with a link to my calendar, and you can grab a call. We can chat further. Okay? All the best.